Okay. Yeah, sorry. Okay. Okay, welcome to the Tokyo Jazz Stones podcast, episode 106. Checks notes.
Bit of a hesitation there.
And confusing one because 106, but it's number 5 on the Tokyo Jazz Stones Top of the Pops Top 10 countdown. And yeah, we're at the halfway mark. And actually, I'm gonna just do something slightly naughty here, because before we crack on with number 5, James, I think it would just be worth a couple of notable mentions, or honourable mentions, as they like to say in the award shows, because it is a very difficult task to choose the top 10, and obviously we have stuck to the rules. We have squeezed it down as best we can to number 10, to 10 choices rather. But I think for me, there's just a couple that I think probably are worth mentioning, because I didn't put them in the top 10 because, not because they're not worthy, but I just think when looking at my list, probably a lot of them are to do with, maybe a couple of exceptions are to do with maybe having only visited once. It's something that we experienced there, or it was a long, long way to get to it, and, it worked out perfectly, like places like Abaru, for example, which, who knows, right? It's difficult to know if you're going to be back there again. But for me, like just 3 joints, I think that the bear mentioning, and I don't need to go into whether you've chosen these or not or anything like that, but I think for me, Jam Jam in Kobe is one, and it's still a very much a working place, so it'll be there for a long while yet, but it's an incredibly large place. It's an incredibly welcoming and warm place. It's kind of unique and evolving, I think, in the sense that, the Masters is doing these Masters nights, and he's kind of almost DJing when you're there. He's playing like track to track to track rather than just playing a side of an album. And so I think for me, Jam Jam is somewhere that deserves an honourable mention, as does Uncle Tom. And I think, again, Uncle Tom, it's a place that, I've been to many times. It's a neighbourhood joint, but also particularly for the incredible, the wife of the original owner, Sumi-san, who's still going strong into her 80s. And I know her son does a lot of the heavy lifting now, but she's still there, and she's still playing really, really heavy music. But she's the most gentle and sort of lovely woman. But then she puts on this, really aggressive jazz. And I just think it's always such a fascinating kind of contrast, because she looks to all the world like the sort of Japanese granny that you see in Shotengai all right across the country, but yet she's behind the counter.
All of a sudden the World Saxophone Quartet comes out, and you're like, whoa, okay,
yeah,
hello,
exactly, yeah,
yeah.
And then finally, just I think another honourable mention for me certainly would be Downbeat, and I know that Downbeat's somewhere that's very close to both of our hearts. It's a neighbourhood place for you. It's down the road from where you live. Yoshihisa-san, is a classic example of someone taking over, taking over the reins from another owner, ensuring hopefully the future of somewhere like Downbeat for many years to come. And he's again evolving. He has different kind of DJ events. He plays new music as well as older music, and just a very, very cool dude, very chill guy, and a brilliant place, and somewhere that in the very early days you took me to, and we sat one day listening to Ole Coltrane. So I think for me, just those 3 deserve kind of an honourable mention, if you like, just on the outskirts of the top 10, but not for any reason other than it's impossible to fit them all.
Exactly. No. I get it. I mean, I mentioned in our kickoff episode of this series that I was sort of not picking all of my old Tokyo hangouts just because that could be the whole top 10, but most of those experiences were before you and I started the project, when I lived in Tokyo. So, Eiga-Con, Eagle, Kawashima-san at Narcissus, Paper Moon, et cetera, et cetera. And I include Downbeat to me as like a second home, because I'm there pretty much once a week a lot of these days, So I thought we talked about it a lot, and I was kind of focusing elsewhere. I would say that my 3, if I pick the 3 that are sort of honorable mention, that were on the short long list, or the long short list, however you want to phrase that. actually would have been probably 5 at this point. But anyway, Octet in Yamagata was one of them. Count in Sendai, and for kind of similar reasons, Octet and Count to me are like two. If somebody said, if you can't actually explain it, you can only say go there, and that's what a jazz kisa is. Okay, if somebody asked you, it's like I can't tell you anything about it. You just have to go and experience it. Those two, for various reasons, would be like the uber sort of jazz kisa. This is what a kisa is, amazing places. And one of the other ones for me was actually Rose Room in Okinawa. That was real close to making the list, just because of how unique it was, how far away it is, and yet how tied into jazz history it is. I think we talked about when you went down to Scarecrow, I was talking about Rose Room and watching the Sakata Akira video in there, and that was just a very special place. So but again, we can't say it enough. All these places are amazing, but if you can only take 10, those are the 10 we came with. So
yeah, I mean, all good choices, I think. And, I think like it just reflects, like you say, it reflects that kind of. Some of them are almost so familiar, It doesn't breed contempt as such, but they're just so familiar that you're kind of used to them, and they don't stand out as a sort of an experience or a place that's unforgettable, but also it's somewhere that if it wasn't there you would desperately miss. And I think that's a really it's just very, very hard, as we said, to kind of pull them all in to a top 10. Maybe we should have top 20, but I feel that would be even more complicated to try and order them. So we're not going to do that, but we'll stick with the format.
One other quick thing, Phil. Very, very quick, just to take care of some tidy business bookkeeping before we go. I forgot on the last episode when I was talking about the great Saramanian, because it is such an unusual name. I should have explained. I had it in the notes, but I just got so caught up in my excitement talking about other things. Saramanian it's really, really cool because, again, it's in Nagasaki, but it's named after Lake Saruma in Hokkaido. And that's where the master Mizuguchi-san had stayed in the Saramanian bed and breakfast up on the lake, way in northern Hokkaido. And the reason the name sounds a little unusual, it doesn't really sound like Japanese, is because it's actually an Ainu name. It's an Ainu of the indigenous people of northern Japan. And Mizuguchi-san was so in love with the place, and he began to fall in love with Ainu culture, which was something he had never experienced being from the south, that's why he decided to name his bar that, rather than the obvious choice of naming it Sunny, which you would have thought, or some other jazz-related name. But, I remember thinking what an odd sounding name it was. It didn't sound like any possible Japanese word I'd ever heard. And so when he told me the story, I thought, oh, okay, that's great. It's great. It's really unique. And I love the fact that he said, he really felt a bond to the Ainu and the indigenous culture and how they were trying to protect it, because it's how he felt about jazz, So I totally forgot that. My blunder last episode. Just had to pay respect to that.
Quick pop quiz. Which other joint is named after an aspect of Ainu culture?
Oh man, that's tough. I'm not gonna get that. I would have to think. It would take too long, and that would be deadly boring podcasting. So no.
I mean, I can't cut out the 10 minutes of silence. It was that Corpicor.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes. This is also a bit up north, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, it was named after, I think, was it a figure from Ainu mythology? And
yes.
Kind of Ainu wooden statue in the barn. If you're interested in Corpicor, you can go back and listen to one of the previous episodes where we talk about it. I think you haven't been yet, but it's up by a lake. It's sort of the antithesis of somewhere like Saramanian, which is, a little tiny space tucked into a little building, up a staircase, etc., etc. And Corpicor is this sprawling, beautiful wooden kind of almost like an alpine chalet type building out by a lake, and connected to a station that's sort of also in the middle of nowhere, it feels like, and so incredible place. Okay, well, look, let's crack on with episode 105 in terms of our choices, and let's get into the top 5. So for me, this was a not controversial choice, but I feel like probably we would be inundated with hate mail had this place not been included in the top 10.
Oh, wow.
That probably plays it down in terms of I think probably my sort of general contrariness, and
is that what we're calling it these days?
My general touche. My general contrariness sort of made me think, oh, it's too obvious to have that in there. But I think probably I'd be remiss to not include it. So you probably guessed where it is. This is a place that incredibly next year it'll be 10 years since we went to, and it's a place I'm very, very glad that we went to. Not least because for a couple of reasons. One, I think, fairly tragic circumstance, but also the advent of the pandemic, closed and has, I think, never really fully reopened. Now, we know it did reopen a couple of times for sort of one-off gigs and sort of special sessions and things like that, but just as a going concern, sadly, it's not really running as it previously was. But it's also the place that is probably one of the most legendary names, and less so now perhaps, but certainly persistently for a while we were constantly asked, had we been to? So is, of course,
yes,
the incredible Basie in Ichinoseki. And I think my reason for choosing this, my reason for not choosing it initially was probably, it's sort of an obvious choice. And, again, because, you're constantly asked, oh, have you been there? Have you been there? And we're like, yes, we've been there. But I think what really swung it for me is that it's one of the few places, perhaps certainly before A Century in Sound, the film that Nick has made, it's probably the only place that's really broken out beyond Japan, in the sense that, there is the documentary about Basie. I think it's called A Love Story, or Swifty's Love Story or something. I need to double check that name. No, The Ballad of Swifty, I think it's called. Isn't that what it is? The Ballad of Swifty. And, certainly, I don't know about outside Japan, but I know that myself and my good friend Michael, who's the programmer at the sort of art house cinema in Belfast, we screened that film here. And, it is sort of, for many Jazz Kisa owners in particular, it is the kind of beacon. It is the place, Basie, the sound system, the size, and of course then the inimitable style and panache of the one and only Sugawara-san, who goes by the nickname Swifty. And I think when we went up that day, before I a few months before I left Japan, we went up that day and we were a little apprehensive because we'd heard different opinions about the owner, and we didn't quite know what to expect. And we'd been in a place beforehand called Royce, where the owner had told us this story as he drove us over to Basie from his own joint, something that involved throwing a glass ashtray at someone's head. So we were like, right, okay. And when we got there was no one there, no other customers. We were ushered into a couple of booth seats. We sat down, we kind of played the game. We were all and I remember, when I think back now, we were very kind of like, sumimasen, sumimasen, like a lot of nodding and very, very like on our best behavior. And I mean, it couldn't have unfolded in a better way, actually, because we sort of sat with our camera out and the books out, and and I think when the woman came over, I said to her, we've come up from Tokyo, and we're doing this and doing that, and she was like, yeah, that's fine, and then my memory is that I think I went to the toilet, or I was wandering around trying to take some pictures, and in this interim period where I was walking around, there was sort of a kerfuffle over by our table, and basically what had happened is that that she had come over and said, Sugawara-san, the owner of Basie, he's invited you over to his table, and he was sitting at this table in this cream blazer, this bling rings on his fingers. He's got his sunglasses on, and he was writing. I remember very distinctly, he was writing this, beautiful calligraphy with this black fountain pen. And when I turned around, next thing, you were picking up the bags and moving over to this table, and then the whole mood changed. Suddenly it was like we were chatting away, and we sat there for a good sort of hour and a half chatting. I remember it being like not much after like 11 a.m. around midday, we were on the heavy we're on the heavy spirits by that stage. And then one of his friends came in who I think had previously been like the editor of Playboy in Japan or something like that.
That's right. And
the whole morning just changed from this sort of like coming into this kind of bowing and scraping, almost like entering a temple, kind of religious sort of humility and and sort of self-flagellation, to suddenly we're at this big table, we're having the crack, we're chatting, we're hearing all these stories. And, I was taken upstairs to the second floor. I was able to photograph there and look at all these incredible, like there's hundreds of drum skins, some of which Elvin Jones had obviously left behind that were up on the wall. There were all these photographs and different things to photograph. And then I came back down and we were just chatting away again. And we left, I don't remember what time, but I remember being certainly you were fairly squiffy by that point, I would say. So that's the reason why, apart from all the mythology and the sort of the legendary status of Basie, for me, it was just one of those days again that, I'll never forget that moment where we kind of like we've been invited to sit at his table, It was like some sort of mafia don had beckoned you over. And I mean, it was just an incredible experience. And it was your first time, it was my first time. And it meant also from that point on, anytime we were asked, we could say, yes, we've been to Basie.
Yes. Fantastic. It's a great pick. Look, what can you really say? I mean, Basie is like, I remember thinking, and sometimes both of us can be a little willfully contrarian, and when people tend to overhype something. And the way I thought about it afterwards was Basie reminded me of when I went to Paris, the only time I went to Paris. And I had it in my head that I was like, I'm not going to like it. I bet it's going to suck. Who cares? Cobblestone, Eiffel Tower, whatever. Really boring. And within about 12 hours, I was just like, oh my God, Paris is amazing. Like, Jesus, it's everything people said it was, It kind of like, it was one of those things that lives up to the hype, basically. Basie, it's massive. I mean, it's one of the biggest joints. The photos in there of every jazz legend just being there or playing there or both, and then getting the drinks on. Clearly, as you mentioned, Swifty liked to live the life a little bit, at least in those days. And it is interesting because, I mean, like you said, I mean, now we've covered this a lot recently, especially Philip. The jazz Kisa culture and the joints themselves have now become so much more well known, worldwide. But just 10 years ago when we went there, Basie was probably the only one. I don't even think Dig and Dug, run by another giant of the jazz Kisa tradition, dearly departed Nakadara-san, wasn't, maybe that was well known just among jazz album collectors because there were some live records recorded there. But Basie was the one that people tended to know. He'd been profiled in audio magazines. He'd been profiled in a couple of like travel segments. It was like, get outside of Tokyo, go to the regions of Japan, that kind of thing. And so, and he is someone, at least he was, someone who clearly, liked the publicity, put it that way, which is why, as you mentioned, some other people in the jazz Kisa world maybe sometimes didn't really like him, or they didn't like his style or whatever. But a completely unique individual, a completely unique place, and a really important place, as we're going to find out soon, because of all of the tentacles that spread out from it. And I think the thing that I'll remember most, in addition to being that, it was, I think, 11:30 by the time we were on our third beer, and Jesus, I mean, I don't think if that had happened, if that had happened now, I don't think the rest of the day would have happened. I would have been like, right, I'm done. I'm off to the hotel. That was a tough start. Do you remember my friend? Shout out to Justin, by the way, who lives up in Iwate. He joined us, my American friend Justin, not a jazz guy, and he was so happy to meet us and to go. And this was his first jazz Kisa, so we walk out of there at like 12:45, already a bit steaming drunk, and riding on a high from the experience of talking to him and getting presents. He gave us some omiyage, remember? Some magazines and stuff from Basie.
That's right, yeah.
And Justin was like, is it always like this? I was like, no, it's not always like this. This was...
Yeah, what a one to come to, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like going to like a sort of a World Cup final and being like, oh, I love football, and then you have to sit through like a third division sort of like
right.
game, where people are just kicking each other in a muddy pitch. It's like... Right, yeah. It's not quite the same, but
it's one of those days that just, I think like on its own as a jazz Kisa, so incredible, so important. The experience of that day of us going together, and like you mentioned, I mean, we were still, that was like our first real big epic day outside of the city. And
it was probably the first really massive journey, because I remember thinking, I knew you were there the day before, but like I remember coming up on the train and thinking, like, it felt, I mean, and this is on a Shinkansen, so you're traveling very, very fast, but like it was about 4 hours or 4.5 hours, and that's the one time I remember really clearly getting out the station and thinking, this is mad, like to be traveling this far to this place for this reason. I remember thinking, this is crazy, and
just to think that like one of the most famous jazz spots in the country, in the whole country, is located in the equivalent of like, you're going up to like, you're going up to the end of the Panhandle in Michigan, where there's no cities around. You know what I mean? It's like, wait, what? Where is it? Like, are you sure? Is this the right station? It's Ichinoseki, not exactly that thriving, pretty far from Sendai, the biggest city up there, and then you just walk in and you're like, oh my God, this is I can't believe this is actually real. Like you couldn't tell people that this is what Basie is and was, but it's at that location. They might not believe you until they went to see it themselves. And I think that since we've had that trip, and you did mention, the very sad news post-COVID, not Swifty-san himself, but unfortunately his daughter, he has been pretty much in a funk since then. And to be fair, he is really getting older himself too. He's slowing down a little bit. But I did see recently, like, he does pop in, and one of his staff, who may have been the woman manager that we met there on that day, apparently is opening it up a little bit more frequently. But if you're planning to go, if you're in Japan or coming to Japan, and I know a lot of our listeners do hit the Jazz Kisa Trail, just check beforehand, and you may be able to figure out a spot where you can get in. They are pretty open to overseas visitors there, because they do know how famous it is, and so I think they may be a little accommodating if you can get in touch if somebody speaks Japanese. But yeah, Basie is basically, if you're thinking about the history of Jazz Kisa, Basie and Doug would probably have to be the top two that you would think for in post-war history, really.
Well, presumably if you call now, you'll get a slightly different response to the one that you got when you called, which I don't know if you remember was, I'm not a train timetable, am I?
Yeah.
You were trying to get a handle on the opening times, and it was
and how far is it from the station? Like, you can see that on a map. I'm very, very New York answer. I was, wow, you don't get that a lot in Japan. Yeah, and that must have been the man. That must have been the man himself too, because I can't imagine one of the staff talking that.
Oh, I'm sure.
That had to have been him. Yeah,
I'm sure. Yeah. There was a Peter Britzman trio album that I noticed he brought over to show us. I'm just wondering why. It wasn't that it was recorded there, would it be? No.
I think a lot of records were recorded. Well, a lot of gigs were there, and I'm sure they recorded a lot of them. So yeah,
that's what I'm just curious about. I must look it up, because I would just wonder why else he would have specifically brought across that particular record. It's sort of a little too blurry. I can see the trio and the names and things, but I can't see where it was recorded. So we can look that up. But
can you imagine hearing Peter Britzman in Basie? I mean,
I know, right?
Jesus.
It's crazy, right?
Wow.
Anyway, to paraphrase your Paris story, we'll always have Basie. So it was a beautiful experience. It was, and the more that I talk about it with you, I think, how could I not have included it in the top 10? So I'm glad it's in there, bang in the middle, claiming its place at number 5. So what about you then? Over to you, and give us number 5.
Okay, so you've been enjoying the word serendipity and serendipitous on the last couple of episodes, but I think you've hit the bullseye with serendipity today, because, and again, just to remind our listeners, you and I have not shared our lists, and so we do not have any foresight into what each other picked. So this is completely coincidental that my number 5 pick is completely related to Basie, because it is, in some ways, you could say, maybe not a sister shop, but maybe the son of Basie, and it is Elvin, located not that far away from Ichinoseki, but it might as well be, because it feels like it's in the middle of nowhere in distant Miyagi Prefecture. Elvin is indescribably unbelievable. How many? I mean, I'm just going to list them off one by one. Elvin is a 2-story barn-like structure that's connected to the guy's house where he runs a butcher shop in front. The owner of Elvin is Ando-san, but he prefers to be called by his real name, Carlos Andone, because, as he tells everyone, he was born in Spain and grew up in Mexico. Not true. That was a nickname given to him because he looked. His friends thought that he looked like some Spanish gangster in a movie they saw in the 70s. Ando-san has 10,000 LPs in his collection, but he does not take requests. Why not? Well, because I have no idea where any particular album is, so it would take me forever to find it. Oh, okay. It's a little early. I don't need a beer. Can I just get a ginger ale? I think we've only got coffee today. And actually, wife, do we have any coffee left? There's no menu. There was no coffee. There was nothing. We didn't have a single drink when we were there. And maybe my favorite quote from Ando-san is, no matter how many times you listen to jazz, no matter how many records you play, you never remember it. So because you can't remember it, you never get tired of it. And because you never get tired of it, I can keep sharing it and teaching it to people. Jazz lives like that. It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, when this guy spoke, wow. it was just like, I couldn't believe it. The other thing was he had a real heavy northern Tohoku accent. So I struggled with it. I actually had to record it on my phone and go back to listen later. But the reason that I said that it was serendipity is because Elvin and, Ando-san, as a young man, went to Basie in 1970, and he loved the jazz record he heard. And he went back home and he bought it. And he played it on his stereo at home. And then he was like, wait a second, this doesn't sound like the same record because it's such the difference in the audio system. And that's what inspired him to become an audio expert, to the end point where he ended up doing the audio at Basie for all of those gigs that we were just talking about. Ando-san was working all of those gigs at Basie, and then eventually decided to go back to his hometown in, I believe it's called Tome City in Miyagi Prefecture. And he opened the shop, I've got in the notes here, 37 years ago, and that was 3 years, so exactly 40 years ago today. He still always kept a good relationship. He considered Swifty-san to be his friend and mentor. And, and another absolutely top 10 great quote. I was like, so, what kind of customers do you get? Are they mostly regulars? He was like, oh, no. Customers don't come here. And I was like, well, it's probably because you don't have anything on the menu, right? But, this guy was an absolute star, laughed the entire time I interviewed him, showed me pictures, took me around and showed me every little piece of memorabilia in the place, including an absolutely beautiful picture of him with Elvin Jones. Elvin, as all our listeners know, great Japan connection through his whole life, through his touring, through his wife Keiko. And Elvin heard about the bar, came up to see him, hung out with him, became friends. Everything about Elvin is just stupendous, from the location, the fact that you can go through the butcher shop if the back door to the place is not open. And yet again, talking about regional places, we spoke about this when you were in Hokkaido at Abiru. It's cold up in Tohoku. And so this kind of tall, big barn space, the way it's shaped, apparently is good when he's got the fire. It keeps the heat in. Who knows? But you do feel like you're up in the north when you're in there. And I remember it took me years to get there because it is really hard. You've got to take a bus from Sendai over the mountains for about 90 minutes. It drops you in a parking lot of a civic center, and you walk down one of these ugly highways with all the chain stores until you turn down some side streets, and then you get to his house. Very, very, very difficult place to get to. But if you are really, really getting deep into your jazz cases, Elvin, you have to go there before he closes. There's truly nothing else like it. And I knew it was going to be on my list the minute you pitched this idea to me, Philip, that we were going to do a top 10. I mean, to me, it was no question Elvin's going to be there. It was only just, where is it going to be? I mean, it was, at one point it was even a little bit higher, actually. But it comes in at 5 for me. And again, beautiful serendipity that this episode for number 5 is Basie and Elvin, since they're so linked together.
Yeah, great choice. And it's funny you should say that, because just looking back at some of the Basie photos, and I didn't make the connection at the time, but obviously the relationship between them and that closeness is there, and you see it. There's quite a few prominent posters for the Elvin Jones Jazz Machine playing at Basie. So, you can kind of picture that all happening and that back and forward and phone calls and, Carlos coming across to do the sound and so on and so forth. And also you see, obviously in Elvin, you see, there's signed pictures of him. There's a signed leather jacket as you come in the door, like a sleeveless, like a biker's jacket with Elvin Jones' signature on the back. There's an Elvin Jones Live at the Town Hall album that's signed. It's up on the wall. And you see this kind of like connection between the two. And I think I hadn't probably twigged at the time when we went to Basie in particular. But also then obviously it's some of, like I said before in the previous episode, some of the drum skins that are hanging up on the wall upstairs. Again, testament to sort of the closeness. And also just again, to go back to this idea of like how, these were not just cafes that played records made in another country by these musicians that were revered. These are places that were named after them, and in many cases, that people themselves, these musicians like Sonny Rollins and Elvin Jones and Count Basie, were in these places. They were sitting in these places, or they were playing in these joints. And it's just kind of incredible to think, that was the case, and not massively long time ago. I mean, in actual fact, we think of those kind of people like Sonny Rollins and Coltrane and Elvin Jones, and you sort of think, 60s and early 70s. But I mean, this was actually later 70s and early 80s. So it's not even that long ago, it's just about 40 years ago in some cases. And it's just kind of a testament to the not only like the depth of involvement of these two cultures, but also how widespread it is. Because we're talking about Basie, we're talking about Elvin, which are not in Tokyo, they're not in Osaka. They're out there in small towns, or in some cases, even further afield. And I just think it's kind of incredible to think of those people coming. I mean, imagine Elvin Jones turning up for the first time at Elvin, thinking, "What, you named it after me?"
Yeah, and you go completely to the other side of the world, a place where nobody speaks your language. You're well known in your field in the jazz world, but nobody cares about you in America. You know what I mean? When you walk down the street and you come here and you go up to the middle of nowhere in bleak northern Japan, and somebody is created what amounts to almost a tribute to a temple to you. I mean, Philip, do you remember an album that both of us have and love, the Heavy Sounds album, right?
Of course. Yeah,
he has that sort of, I don't know if it's on the piano. I think it's on the piano. The piano's covered and stuff. It's obviously not used anymore. There's pictures and albums. I have to find the photo I took of it, but he has it like sort of in the center, and it's spotlit. And it's in a frame, and you've talked about that before, how many of the jazz joints we've been to, that they sometimes have this sort of shrine-like feeling to them, whether it's the way the audio is set up, like at Eigakan or Root Down in Tokyo, another great one, or so it could be like towards the audio system, the way it's set up, or it's towards the artist that they particularly love. And that's what it feels like in Elvin. I mean, the way that he has those photos around, and then the spotlight on the album. Just amazing. I mean, you combine that, the physical location, the physical space itself, this sort of like 2-story, like huge barn-like feeling, is unbelievable. But then like Ando-san himself, I like easily right up there with what's his name? Is it Hattori-san at Brownie? For the most laughing, the most gregarious laughing jazz bar owners. I mean, he had himself in hysterics, when we were talking to him. And I'll never forget going there. And it was cold, man. That was that stupid trip that I shouldn't say stupid. It turned out to be amazing, but a misguided trip that I did in January 3 years ago when I overestimated my Northeastern American ability to handle winter. I've been in Tokyo too long, man. It was cold up there. And walking from this parking lot to Elvin, I just remember thinking to myself, like, what? This better be worth it, man. Because like it's going to be all day just to get here. And I'm freezing cold and pissed off already. And when I walked in immediately, I was like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. So yeah, actually a bit of a surprise that I had it at 5, I guess, because the competition is so intense. But yep, there we are.
It's tough. It's a tough one to fit them all in. And if you sat down in 6 months' time, you might reshuffle all the numbers.
For sure.
So yeah, nice way to sort of to draw the halfway line there with the number 5s. We're into the final 4, but Basie and Elvin, brothers in arms, and both incredible joints in their own way. And yeah, like you said, if you're interested in seeing places that you'll probably never see the like of again, definitely try and get to either of those. And the Heavy Sounds photograph actually that I took that you referenced will definitely for sure be in a second Tokyo Jazz Joints book. I've banged on a lot about religious spaces and that kind of almost like pseudo-religious sacred space, and I think that to me always stands out as a really good example of that, where you just have this, you know, the record itself, funnily enough, not signed by Richard Davis, which is unusual, but because we know how he loved a Sharpie. But basically, you know, it's there like a religious relic. You know, it's kind of positioned in such a way, and even the name of the title, you know, Heavy Sounds. I mean, is there any better description of the audio environment of Elvin? So yeah, incredible place and great choice. And that's us at number 5. So we've only got 4 left. I'm not going to do my 4, 3. Oh, nearly did it. 3, 2. I've just done it anyway. 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown. But yeah, I mean, it's incredible to get to the final 4. I'm looking forward to seeing what you've chosen, and I hope the feeling is mutual. And yeah, we're getting to that final number 1 spot, that much coveted number 1 spot.
Yeah, and I have.
Who covets it?
I have. Oh, listen, come on. Our listeners are very loyal on the edge of their seats. I think, yeah, I'm trying to guess. Yes, already only 4 left. I'm trying to see if I can guess where you're going to be going, because of the 6 so far, I think I only would have picked, had you picking 2 of those. So the other 4 you surprised me on. So, and I think it was the same with my choices. I've surprised you on a couple of them. So yeah, interesting. Let's see where it ends up. But I can't wait.
Okay, well, look, I will chat to you next week for number 4 on the charts and episode number 107. Thanks, as always, for listening. Thanks for sticking with us. If you like the podcast, do like it wherever you listen to it, because it does help. Do share it with other people if you think they might be interested. And James,
how could they not?
To you. Yeah, I'll chat to you next week. In the meantime, take it easy. Have a good week.
You bet. Stay safe in what looks to be rather cloudy and rainy Belfast. I did check the weather app yesterday for you, and good for your photographing. But yeah, bundle up, buddy. Take it here.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Right,
bye bye.
Take it easy.